AMD, which is now down approximately 60% year to date, is expected to hold their conference call tomorrow evening. And so that's what I'm going to dive into in this video and give you a bit of a preview on it. So guys, as you smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Let's dive right into this one. So you can see that AMD is actually down 60%, down to 60 bucks a share year to date. And really the pessimism has all been around the slowdown in the consumer market, especially with their computers segment. And so we'll dive a little bit more deeper into that. But yes, you can see that the pain is relevant for AMD shareholders. And while I remain a bull on AMD, we do have to point out the fact that there is a deteriorating demand environment for computers. And so it's absolutely something that we do have to take into consideration when we look at both Intel's revenues and AMD's revenues. The one thing that I would say which helps AMD in this environment is that they are less levered to the slowdown in the consumer segment, whereas Intel, their revenues are more levered. And then of course, the company or the chip maker that's best positioned here is of course NVIDIA. And you can see here in this report by Barron's, they're saying that industry demand for consumers has been softening this year. Worldwide shipments for personal computers fell 15% year over year in September, so that's substantial. And notice that Morgan Stanley semiconductor analyst Joseph Moore reaffirmed his overweight rating for AMD stock, but he cut his price target for the shares to $77 from $68. And so that's something very relevant for you guys to pay attention to. And effectively what he went on to say is that given the magnitude of the deterioration in the business, he doesn't expect confidence to immediately resume, and the stock might continue to be sluggish over the near term. But like I always say to you guys, analysts have a 1-year target. The valuations that I provide to you on this channel, it's a more of a long-term intrinsic value target. And that's what I believe that investors should be looking at anyways at the end of the day. The buy side definitely has sort of like intrinsic value targets, or at least the buy side that I used to communicate with when I was on the sell side. And so that's kind of what I use for my personal portfolio as well. I just try to determine what the company is valued at over the long term in today's dollars, which of course means that I'm discounting those expected cash flows to the owners over the long term into today's dollars. And so that's generally the valuation that I provide. And note guys that AMD actually pre-announced their third quarter 2022 financial results. And so what they said is that they actually expect third quarter revenues to be lower than the prior outlook of $67 billion, plus or minus $200 million, primarily due to the weaker consumer segment revenue. That's that computer segment that we were just talking about in the Barron's article. Note, however, the strength in the business. Revenue for the data center, the gaming segment, which I thought would have gone backwards, but it didn't, and the embedded segments actually grew significantly year over year, and in line with the company's expectations. But they are saying that preliminary results reflect lower than expected client segment revenues resulting from two items. The first one is reduced processor shipments due to weaker than expected PC market, and the other issue is that significant inventory correction, which is something that we have spoken about. It is also something that Michael Burry did predict earlier this year when he said that there would be a bullwhip effect. You're definitely seeing it in the consumer computer market. And here's where their segments are stacking up. So we right now expect their data center, which I believe has strong secular growth characteristics behind it, to be up 45% year over year. I do not expect this segment to be up 45% year over year in 2023 and beyond. And so I'll show you how I'm significantly reducing the growth prospects for all segments in my valuation, but I do expect that you guys to make your own decisions on these. And so you see the client segment is down 40% year over year, and then the gaming segment is up 14% a year, and the embedded, it's hard to judge because they just acquired that business. And so total, they're up 29% year over year. Now, I do not expect 29-30% revenue growth into the future. And once again, I'll show you that in a second. And just recall, guys, for any of you guys that are interested, they are hosting their conference call at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Now, the one thing that I always say is that if you own shares in a company, it's very important to listen to or at least read the conference call, because it gives you a really good understanding of the direction of the company. I tend to read or listen to most conference calls of the companies that I own shares in. Now, just full disclosure, I don't yet own shares in AMD. I'm getting very greedy in this environment, and I'm waiting for the shares to pull back a little bit more before I buy into it. But I will give you the price that I'm looking to buy AMD at. Now, notice that I do agree with them with their latest presentation that they put out, with was their sort of like investor day. I do believe that over the long term, the segments provide a future focused growth opportunity. And I really expect the embedded segment to be the largest grower due to the emergence of new technologies and vehicles, including autonomous driving. Now, I don't expect them to be the largest segment for the business as a whole. I just expect this segment to grow significantly. I do believe that data center, which they're saying has a $50 billion market opportunity, is growing fast as well. The cloud is emerging. I think PCs, of course, just the natural growth of the PC segment. However, you're going to see some near-term pullback. And I think gaming has a secular growth characteristic behind it as well. So all four of these segments, I believe, have strong secular growth characteristics. Now, once again, I do say that the PCs is the more mature industry. And so if I were to pick a chip manufacturer, NVIDIA is the one for me, but I do like the fact that AMD is cheaper on a intrinsic value calculation for me, or valuation. And so that's why I am holding strong to AMD. I might probably just end up buying a little bit of both. Now, this is the model that the Patreons get access to at that lower $5 level. So if you wanted access to this model and all of the other models, you can join us on the Patreon at the lower level and you automatically get access to this model. Now, there has been tremendous growth, and you can see that with the revenues, especially in 2021, where revenues grew almost 70%. But just because there's been tremendous growth, I don't think that you're going to see this level of growth rate continue. And so you're going to see how I'm forecasting out that I'm not forecasting it anywhere near these growth levels. But at the same time, I don't buy the peak cycle narrative in the face of all the technological problems that we're seeing as we as a global society have to solve these issues. Three of the areas that I see emerging are AI, the cloud business, and Web 3.0. And they're all emerging technologies that AMD will be looking to be powering on the way there. And so will there be a slowdown in the chip space? Of course there's going to be a slowdown, and we are starting to see that a little bit. But will we go backwards for a decade? I don't think so. And so the way that I'm forecasting this out is I'm just slowing the growth rate of the business as a whole. And I'm hoping that eventually, 5, 6, 7 years out, I'm surprised on the upside, which I absolutely believe will happen. And so this is what I mean. So you can see here, this is my forecast for AMD's segments. Now, first thing I do want to point out is that they have provided us with a more detailed view of their segments, which I believe was absolutely needed, and I'll be putting more intelligence into growing out these segments as I forecast out growth using the information that they provide with their quarterly results. But you can see here right now that I'm forecasting all segments in 2023 to grow at 7.5%. And then that'll increase to 10% in 2024, and then 12.5% in 2025, and hold steady thereafter. So much lower than the 60 or 70% growth that you were expecting. Of course, 2022, I expected to grow a little bit faster, but then that growth is going to slow down. But also note, essentially, the main point that I'm making here, and it's in that second comment there, is that despite being an AMD bull, I am not expecting huge growth to continue. I'm actually expecting a substantial slowdown in the growth rate of revenues. Now, some of you guys might say, hey, you're still a little bit optimistic with your 12.5% 2 or 3 years out. I'd say you're not wrong. You just sort of have to justify how you're getting to that. And I do expect that my growth rates will be sort of like segment specific as I dive through their Q3 guidance, and hopefully they provide Q4 or 2023 guidance. And so I'll have a better idea of how to forecast this out. So this is where I'm sitting right now. I'm being a little bit pessimistic from my perspective, but of course, some of you could argue that I'm a little bit optimistic in 2025 and beyond. And, I'm not going to argue that for now, but let's see what information they provide and how much information they give us to sort of forecast this out. But what does this mean for my valuation? I know a lot of you guys are thinking that. Well, I actually brought down my terminal multiple to 15 times earnings. So you guys can bring that up to 20 if you really want. But essentially, I'm valuing the company at approximately $90 per share, $92 per share, call it that. So with the current share price of around $60 per share, I believe the share price as a percentage of its intrinsic value is 66%. So It's still trading significantly below its intrinsic value, but I'm going to be a little bit more picky when it comes to picking the stock up. I would love to get it at around $45 or lower. And so I will give you guys a look as to what sort of the options opportunities look like in a separate video. But that's kind of where I'm sitting on AMD right now. I still believe that it's a very exciting opportunity. I'm not the best analyst or sort of like reviewer when it comes to technology stocks or semiconductor stocks, because I've just started to learn about them. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt, but it might also be a fresh opinion or fresh set of eyes for you guys, because a lot of people that talk about semiconductor stocks, especially on YouTube, tend to be very specific on technology names as a whole. My portfolio is generally a little bit of everything. I don't have a lot of tech, or at least I'd probably make up maybe around 10, maybe 30% of the portfolio, maybe 10 to 30, somewhere around there. But I have a lot of like old world industries as well. I'd consider myself closer to like a Peter Lynch type investor than sort of like a technology focused investor. So I'll leave it there for you guys. But if you do want to see my breakdown of AMD and their business as a whole, I'll link that video right here. And if you don't want to learn more about AMD, but you want to learn more about NVIDIA, I actually did a video detailing NVIDIA's business prospects and model over here.